I lived in heaven as a developer. My source code was a beautiful creation, and I dedicated myself to the whole open source void. I was so relaxed. Until something happened. This guy came, and they took the music down and put my cocktail away. And the worst thing about it, they didn't mention anything about leaving. Welcome to the new world of EU Cyber Resilience Act, and that is how some of us as developers, especially in the open source world, feel ourselves about the CRA, but I hope I can demystify some of the things about the regulation itself during this talk and also provide some technical advice how to navigate it. Welcome, everybody. Again, my name is Roman, and I'm from Ireland, the beautiful home of Guinness, Jameson, and all of these good things. Also, I work for Red Hat when I'm principal architect and responsible for strategic community and industry engagement in security space. But also, and I'm a practitioner, I work in security for almost 20 years, doing all the things from vulnerability response to architecting the systems and defending enterprise and products from cyber attacks. But recently, in the last year, I jumped into this compliance activity into the EU Cyber Resilience Act as an expert for the European standardization organizations because this thing matters, and if we don't do it right, it's gonna provide a lot of harm to the ecosystem and to all of us actually. And yes, also I am a huge supporter of open source and typically help open source projects on their security journey. All right, what is the EU Cyber Resilience Act? I think it's good to start with the definition of this thing. This is a regulation, okay, that aims to safeguard consumers and businesses buying or using so-called PDEs, products with digital elements, with introduction of mandatory cybersecurity requirements for manufacturers of these products throughout the entire life cycle, and notably its supply chain also. Imagine third parties and open source components that are obviously included in all of the products that you can see out there. And CRA actually applicable to all who does commercial activity in or with EU, so that it's not really solely EU thing, especially when we think about software, it's a really international thing. That's why all of the big American companies and other international companies are actually concerned about these things. And if you're wondering what's on the picture, this is the famous cheese picture that's produced by European Commission, I think, roughly 1 year ago, and represents the good intention of the Cyber Resilience Act, actually to fix those supply chains that's on the left, like holes in the cheese, and to make it finally right, to make security finally as a mandatory thing for all the products, which is good. Now, what PDEs are, and this is one of the common misconceptions when I talk to people about the scope of the Cyber Resilience Act. Sometimes we think, okay, this is only for devices or for the physical things that are out there. Actually, PDEs are everywhere, as you can see on this picture, and the regulation defines the certain classes of this PD that you can see on the slide, for example, smart home operating systems, or even web browsers, password managers, or firewalls, hypervisors, or in the critical category, hardware devices with secure boxes, smart mirror gateways, smart cards. I think they're all really important and critical to secure and at least to think about them that should be secure. But actually everything else is also in scope. All the consumer devices that are out there and all the software, because PDEs include hardware and software separately. Okay, and actually, everything else is counted roughly as more than 90% of everything else. So that means the scope is really wide, is really huge. Now, what's out of scope, which is very important to mention. Out of scope products covered by the regulations like automotive, medical, aviation, or national security regulations, something like that, which kind of makes sense. Pure websites are out of scope, as well as software as a service platforms. But this is with a huge caveat because there is still yet to be developed the clear definition for RDPs, remote data processing solution. Basically, if your cloud is essential to operate with your device, say you use your cloud to kind of tune in your fridge or microwave or something like that, and this is untouchable from the product, it's in scope as well. But the general cloud solutions like AWS, Google, and etc., when you just rent some compute there, is out of scope. Free and open source software, FOSS. You will hear this acronym a lot during this presentation. If not used in course of commercial activity, also out of scope, which is great, which was not in the first version of Cyber Resilience Act, but we as an open source community made sure that we made this exclusion. Now, what could go wrong with this exception? Of course, everything, unfortunately. It could be quite small, but I will describe what's in this picture. It's an email that the open source project libc and maintainer of this projects received a couple of months ago, and that states this is queries to vendor, and the questions are: is secure software development lifecycle followed in your libc open source library? Do you comply with CRA requirements? And my favorite one, do you provide proof of conformity regarding adherence to your CRA? And on the left-hand side, you can see the dates, and the date of the email and the date for a required response. And thanks for giving us exactly 2 weeks. Open source, big vendor to the open source maintainers to respond to this. And this is happening. This is actually represents the huge complexity and the huge misunderstanding of the CRA across the industry. And hopefully that gives you all the perspective why we do these things, why I do these things, to kind of explain what CRA actually means to everybody, and most importantly, to work within these officials to make sure they do the right things with implementing the regulations, so that open source ecosystem continue to live and ensuring their longevity. Because you know what? Open source maintainers owe you nothing, right? And regulation is not an exception here. So we definitely don't want to regulate open source. And right now is a good time to actually make it right instead. Now, important open source software roles in Cyber Resilience Act. I think it's it really would be great to clarify them. There are not all the roles here on the slide, but to simplify and to so that you're not bored with all of these things. There are 3 main key roles related to development, related to open source. First of all, manufacturers. There are key actors in the Act. This is who actually develops the product and sells them to the market. Right, this kind of makes sense. Manufacturer, and this is weird to hear manufacturer for software, right? This is great to hear or appropriate to hear manufacturer of a car, but not manufacturer of piece of software, but they're all manufacturers. OSS maintainers and contributors, as I mentioned, they're out of scope largely, but they're mentioned somehow in the regulation, and the very important role is actually first appears in the regulation entirely and in the standards in general. We didn't see this role before. Open source software steward. If you can think of the foundation, for example, Linux Foundation of OWASP, or Python Foundation, or Apache, they kind of all typically non-commercial, non-for-profit organizations that help to govern open source projects. So those are stewards. The sad news here is that most of the open source projects will not have open source software steward, obviously, because there's still a lot of projects, not even the kind of small and hobbyist project, but also the big projects that are very popular that just developed by one maintainer or a couple of them, and they don't belong to any other foundation. So this is very important to keep in mind. Now the timeline. I also found it's useful to put the timeline here because a lot of people asked me these questions during these multiple days. The timeline is actually pretty hard. The regulation is already here. And there is a timeline you can see on the slide, but I would like to drag your attention to the September 2026, where reporting vulnerability obligations will come to enforcement, and December 2027 is the full application of the law. So all of the products that will be put onto the EU market should be compliant with the CRA after this date. And fines, of course, this is nothing to do, if there are no fines, right? Fines are pretty huge. That's why all of big corporations, and actually small corporations as well, small companies that produce software or hardware, they are concerned and they must pay attention to this, if not already. Requirements. I didn't mean to include this slide, but again, during this 2-3 days, there was a lot of question what it actually means to comply with CRA, what the requirements are, and I decided just to put them blanket list here. Most of the requirements for manufacturers, that's very important to keep in mind. Like 99% them really for manufacturers, and for everybody else, like stewards, they're light regime, so that they supposed to be not enforceable. But along these manufacturers are they all great things that we as a security professionals have been actually talking about for decades to all of the engineering teams, right? And to all the people out there, hey, do security by design and security by default configurations. Do the proper risk management, vulnerability management, take care of the, or at least check the actively exploited vulnerabilities, something like that. S-bombs also is the big thing in the CRA. Some of the new things that's coming up with the conformity assessment and CE marking. If you look at your device, like phone or I don't know, printer at home, you probably can spot on this CE mark that is affixed to the device. So the same concept would apply to under the CRA as well. It would be interesting to see how to stick this mark to the piece of software that's hanging out there in the internet, but we will see. And also free updates for the 5 years at least, support and updates. Now there are all the kind of requirements and glance, and they will be clarified actually under the standardization effort that is ongoing right now. Now, this chart, again, this is small, but I will be giving away the presentation anyway. This is the, a lot of people are still asking, of course, I'm affected or not, but should I do anything, if at all, under the CRA if I somehow work with open source, right? And I will try to spell this chart for you. So first of all, if you're a contributor to the open source project that are you not maintainer for, go down. So you don't have any obligations under CRA, just relax, like this guy on the first slide on the beach. If you're a maintainer of the open source project or help somehow to maintain the project and don't take money for anything at all, if answer is yes, you're out of scope. If you maintain a maintainer and accept donations, that covers the actual cost of living and the actual cost of the development of the platform that you may use, maybe something else. you also don't have obligations under the CRA. You're all good. Only if you're a maintainer of the open source project and charge for support, service, or data, or sell somehow the project or licenses related to this project, you might be in scope of CRA. But if not, you're also out of scope. This is very important to understand. If you're just developer or even open source enthusiast, something like this, or even take donations but do not earn kind of the real big profits out of your projects, you're out of scope. Again, this is very important to understand. A couple of other things important to understand is, yes, like to reiterate, contributor, developer, you're out of scope. Just to make it clear, if you work for a company and develop something or contribute to something, don't be bothered, right? It's at minimum, it's the company's obligation if they do some products or and sell them, but you are all good. If you're a maintainer, you're out of scope if you don't monetize. If any of those, you're out of scope if your project is not a product with digital elements. This is, again, very important to understand. I know this is all boring stuff, regulations, but think of documentation or research projects or alpha, beta, something, test that you can put out there on the GitHub repo, for example. It's all out of scope. It's not a product by definition, right? It's not intended to use in any production capacity and etc. And you are also out of scope if the PD is not placed on the EU market, which is very sophisticated definition, but if it's not monetized, if you don't sell, you're out of scope. I hope that makes sense so far. And again, all of the requirements and fines for manufacturers, for these companies, right? Not for maintainers and even not for stewards to some extent. And yes, if you are still scared a little bit and think that is something that is, is going to hit, you're not alone with this understanding. We're all scared, to be quite honest. And you're not alone here. We can help. These brilliant guys, you can see in the picture. I will explain who does what in this picture. First of all, I would start with the beautiful initiatives that are happening out there under Eclipse Foundation. There is the org. That's why this little org picture on the top right corner. This is Open Regulatory Compliance Working Group, purely open source. We do awareness and guidances. We do inventory. We help projects and manufacturers and everybody actually navigate the CRA compliance. We will be building specifications and etc. If you want to join, you can simply Google us or OSS working group, or go to the GitHub or scan the QR code. It's all free of charge. It's open source. You can jump into the calls without any registrations or SMS or something like this. So it's good collaborative activity. Please join us to work on the beautiful things. What exactly we do? We, for example, answer all of these questions that a lot of us actually still have, right? What is CRA? Where's the official text? What is not in scope of CRA? For example, is distributing binaries or container images of open source project considered as making it available on the market, and therefore you're in scope or not? So there are good questions that we do CRA FAQ for this, and now it has a beautiful website, cra.orc workinggroup.org. You can find some of the questions out there, or just Google us. What else we do? Under the OpenSSF, which stands for Open Source Security Foundation, which under Linux Foundation, we do a lot of brilliant things around security. But specifically, I'm co-chairing this Global Cyber Policy Working Group, which is also working to simplify some of the CRA requirements to everybody, actually. Again, we're not limiting ourselves to help open source maintainers exclusively or manufacturers. We want to help everybody actually to put them all together under the one table so that we can talk to each other, which is actually the core point of the Cyber Resilience Act, specifically when it comes to open source ecosystem. It demands manufacturers finally to give something back to open source even if it's conversation, it's already a good start. So what we do under this working group, we do serial clarifications, blog posts, workshops. We have done the recent brilliant workshop in Ghent in Belgium, actually last week. And we do some tools and etc. And the beautiful thing is this CRA free class. Again, you can Google it easily, OpenSSF CRA class, which is free of charge. And it provides some basics about the Cyber Resilience Act. It's not that deep, it's super quick, but then you can get the basic understanding first. And also you get this nice badge. You can attach Credly badge to LinkedIn. So this is quite nice. It's already more than 5K people have taken this class. Again, this is kind of purely free. And if you want to join, just join us. We also have the regular meetings. We have the materials that you can learn. Jump us, ask questions. We're happy to see everybody. Again, open source is so brilliant. You can join whenever you want and do whatever you want. Now, what practical things we do? I promised that inside the presentation I'm going to show some practical things, not only this overview of the regulation, but how the current security practices and tools could be as easily as possible and as meaningfully as possible applicable to projects, and that actually would applicable to open source project, but also to your own products if you work for enterprise or for companies. First of all, I'm going to start with these beautiful projects also under OpenSSF, which is called Open Source Product Security Baseline. This is the framework. Basically, as of last release of October, I think, 2025, 62 requirements across 3 levels of maturity, covering 8 areas of security practices. But if you have a look at the slides, you can see, among others, documentation, legal, quality, governance. They're not purely security, right? It's just good practices that I think all the projects, or definitely product, would like to undertake, would like to implement, just because we all want to do the right things, right? And I think, I mean, as a former developer, I always think that we wanted to do the quality products, right? The best in class. So this is the best practices. They're focused, they're only must requirements, no should, so there's no like wiggle, which is good, and they're realistic and practical to implement. One example is this, for example, AC 02.01. When a new collaborator is added to your Git repo, for example, the version control system must require a manual permission assignment or restrict the collaboration permissions. Kind of makes sense. The least privilege principle, which is one of the core principles of the security overall, right? So it kind of makes sense to do it actually, or to enable this capability in whatever your favorite Git platform you use. Now, how can it help with the Cyber Resilience Act? Would be the next good question. Actually, this is already existing mapping between the open source baseline to the other security frameworks that are developed by NIST, for example, US agency that's throw out some of the security requirements and other technical requirements to other popular frameworks. But now the group did the mapping to CRA, and for example, just one top here. OSPS, all compiled released software assets must be delivered with a software bill of materials, SBOM basically, which is a good practice to do in general, of course. But in CRA, actually, this is a mandate for SBOMs now. So all the manufacturers, at least, would need to produce these SBOMs. And this is one-to-one connection between the good practice that is written in OSPS and the CRA. The same is applicable for example, documentation must contain security context. It kind of makes sense if you produce documentation, whether it's open source projects or the products, it makes sense to provide some context, right, to report the vulnerabilities. And so on and so forth. So this all mapping, we assume would be really helpful for manufacturers and developers and companies, and also for open source projects that's out there to just, okay, I'm implementing OSPS at a certain level, and that would help me like almost 100% to cover the CRA requirement. Again, this is not one-to-one, but I'm doing the good things, and most probably I'm going to be all right. Also, these all things, if you pretend you enable all of these, so you kind of do this, and that, all these combined may help with so-called voluntary attestations, or how I personally call it CRA compatible for projects, right, for that piece of software. The notion of voluntary attestations actually pretty simple. It's intended under the CRA. There is a special section talking about the voluntary attestations for open source project. That basically means if you would like, and only if you would like, it's not an obligation, but that is possible for you as a project to do all of these security practices and call yourself attested, kind of CRA compatible. I don't like compliant because for open source project, compliance is not a thing, right? But I do all of these things, and that means I'm good. So this is voluntary attestation thing intended to help them, then manufacturers, to make sure that they consume secure third parties in their own products. Simple example: imagine OpenSSL, right, or Linux kernel even, or some other libraries, glibc, whatever packages you consume. If you, as a company who ingest all of this into your own product, if you kind of can check that these guys do a great job in security, I think you would sleep much better. So that's the intention. Again, voluntary thing. That's the goal only for those projects who really want to show off that they do good things. This is a good picture, actually, how CRA compatible may look like. This is the recently published GitHub repo. Again, you can go and check. It's all open. It's all free by this brilliant person, James Peter Serling. They've done the whole GitHub repo with how this could be shown at the project itself, at the GitHub repo, right? For example, how to exactly write down that the project's kind of compatible with essential cybersecurity requirements, or how to produce the conformance assessment evidence, how it may look like with all these markdowns and etc. Very much nice illustration how it potentially could be done. There is no standardized way so far how to do this, and this is brilliant attempt, at least to get some of the sense how it may look like. Okay, now maintainer. Do we have any open source contributors in the room who contributes to open source? Yes, good. If you are a maintainer, how to react, or if you're a contributor but close to the kind of project governance and etc., how to react? Remember, I showed you the request that put it that way by Ugly, big company. Hey, open source projects, are you compliant actually? So how to react for these type of things? That could be like, are you CRA compliant, or provide please security related information about your projects, or something else. Consider it as a collaboration opportunity, right? If most of the open source projects quite obviously are under-resourced and they don't want to do anything beyond the bare minimum, which is absolutely understandable, and I get it. But if you have something that you are not doing and you need help with, you can express your interest back and say, hey, why don't you help with this, this, and that, so that we can kind of collectively achieve this goal of the good security posture for my open source project, because I believe you, manufacturer, actually reach out to me because you consume my product, my open source projects, right? So why don't we do this all better together? Point out to another entity who actually monetize your project. That could be also an opportunity to collaborate. For those advanced maintainers who are not kind of monetizing their project, but probably would like to, or have the good handles with the companies who do this, kind of good collaboration opportunity. And there are two examples how curl And the brilliant Swedish guy Dennis Stenberg does this with the commercial company, and OpenSSL also does this with their commercial company. So this is kind of two good use cases how to navigate this, both for open source project and for the commercial offering of this open source project. Don't be over defensive. I would suggest to provide gentle "I'm not your supplier" just in case if you don't want to respond. Again, you don't have to. You can just think in your head, go away and do nothing. But if you still want to respond for some reason, just provide gentle response, "I'm not your supplier." And in the CRA FAQ that I just showed you under the working group, we have this template. That's also in the screenshot here, like how to respond with the references to the CRA text itself, so that these manufacturers go away of you. Now, if you're a maintainer or just open source supporter, you might want to improve security posture of your product. And I intentionally crossed out this CRA because to me, the majority of the things and the spirit of the CRA is actually good, and it's supposed to lead to the just good security posture and the quality product and projects. What you can do is the kind of simple things: enable available security features on your favorite Git platform. Unfortunately, as I am engaged to a lot of open source projects out there, I still see they don't enable MFA, or they don't enable just the native security features and all of these scans that are offered for free as for open source projects for them at the majority of the platforms, of the Git platforms. So just enable all of these things. Check security and vulnerability management policy. It's often written under the security markdown file, and there are a couple of examples. I also you can follow the link and find them out there. But the vulnerability reporting is the major thing under this CRA, so we probably would like to revisit this. Explore security baseline. As I mentioned, this is a good thing. This is a just good framework of the good security practices. And level 1, even level 1 is a really good step. There is nothing really dramatic to do in the level 1. There's again just mostly secure by default configurations that you wanted to enable, and probably adjust your documentation a little bit, but it's a fantastic step. Now, if you wanted to go, and these three things actually arguably would be enough for the CRA stuff. As I mentioned, there is no standardization yet, but we are working on kind of making sure the bare minimum of the good security practice is standardized in some way, so that it's first applicable to the majority of the projects, if not to everybody, and second, understandable by all the parties, including all these regulators and etc. So this top 3. Now, if you're a little bit advanced, document your security development practices. There is another specification or framework that called security-insights.yaml that is basically machine-readable notation or kind of formats of the security practices that you already do for your project. For example, okay, this is my, I do threat modeling, or I do SAST scanning, right? Or I do composition analysis scanning, or I do SBOMs, or something like that. So just declaration of the good security practices that you actually do, but in machine-readable format. Quite nice, because it could be consumable by others to actually verify very quickly and assess your project if they need to. OpenSF best badge, I will go to this example a little bit later. Document security self-assessment, also a good practice, as well as SBOMs. Generate and store, and there are a lot of open source tools, of course, to generate SBOMs, and now you can store and analyze them with the open source projects like GUAC and Trustify, for example. Again, completely free and open source project that you can roll out either within the organization or for open source project to store all of this SBOM information, security advisories, combine them all together in machine-readable format and have the nice picture, do prioritization. quite nice actually, with a even user interface if you want. If you don't want, it of course supports CLI, but it's kind of user-friendly thing. And about Minder, I will tell you just in a minute. Now, automated. You can ask the question, okay, there are all good security practices, but it sounds like a little bit manual work, which could be at some extent, especially when working on documentation and etc. But for some of the things, you can automate it to some extent. And this is one example. Keycloak is actually just open source project. I think the most popular and most adoptable open source project for SSO kind of management and identity and access management. But if you kind of look into the GitHub repo itself, it has best practices page, which is justification that this project implements all of the security practices, all of the best security practices. And this is nice page on the GitHub repo itself, so that everybody can go and check, and of course project can brag about that. OpenSSF Scorecard is also a good project under OpenSSF, which is essentially the job that could be performed in the GitHub Actions, for example, or another automation, and periodically can check that the project utilizes all the security practices and then produce also the page within the score. And all of the security practices are more or less aligned with what I have been talking about previously, right? Whether or not there are any dangerous workflows, do you sign your release if you do binary releases, do you perform code reviews, how you handle token permissions, which is quite important and actually is the very popular attack vector through the open source project to the companies. That is how my previous company got hacked a little bit. So this is nice automation that you could implement to the project, whether for your own project in the company or for the open source project. Minder, another brilliant tool under OpenSSF and also open source completely, that actually implements some of the automation out there, so they can roll out some of the policies. And on the screenshot on the right-hand side, you can see the YAML files with these configurations. For example, actions check default permissions, check pinned tags, Salsa, which is the framework and standard for provenance for the software. So this tool can help with automation of all of these good practices that you may already implement within your projects, and open source, of course. Now, finally, why we care as a Red Hat about all of these security things, and most importantly about the CRA things. That's actually a good question, because we as a company occupy the weird position under the Cyber Resilience Act. We are a manufacturer because, quite obviously, we are a vendor of enterprise open source software solutions. Think of RHEL operating system or OpenShift, our cloud platform, right? But also we are open source software stewards because we host some of the most popular open source projects and support them, like Fedora, for example, operating system, or Lama recently, and something like this. So we are stewards. You remember these roles, right? And this CRA, manufacturers, stewards, and also Red Hatters are contributors and maintainers for the thousands of open source projects out there, starting from Linux kernel and so on. Okay? And we also try to lead the efforts on this space. What I've taken today is already channeled through the standardization efforts and the EU officials channels, so that we make sure that those good security practices are actually incorporated in the meaningful and reasonable way into the regulation and the standards. On the positive note, right? Hopefully you're not that scared so far. On the positive note, why CRA is good? This is like a compiled message that I keep hearing from some of the security experts that I talk to, and also represent my personal position. CRA actually has a potential to make more for supply chain security, and finally aims to fix this problem at scale, just in a few years, because we have deadlines, we have this pressure. then we, as security experts, were lurking behind the engineers and trying developers to convince just to do the good security things, right? So CRA is naturally a good thing, but of course, we'll want to make CRA even better because that goes far beyond compliance. Again, that's why I jumped into this activity. I'm not necessarily a compliance person, right? But CRA also goes beyond the compliance because regardless of your role, steward, manufacturer, maintainer, or just developer, you probably want to join this effort to make it all right, right? And to make finally the kind of good, in collaboration, make it all right. And you can read other statements in the Red Hat CRA blog that we do. Also, kind of good to know what we think about all these things. And takeaways. Would like to leave you with a couple of takeaways. Do not stop contributing and support open source because of the CRA. This is the major takeaway, the main one, right? Please continue to contribute. As I showed you, likely you're out of scope, actually, at least as a person, right? Definitely. Learn and educate others in the community. It's actually free for most of the cases, as I showed you, classes, and other avenues when you can collaborate and learn. Take it as a call for improving quality and security posture for open source. Join community efforts. We need your voices. This is super important because otherwise we don't know whether what we are offering and what we are working on is applicable to your case or not. If it's not, speak up, join our efforts, ask these questions so that we have more voices in the community and opportunity to answer these questions and to address these concerns. And again, to make it all right. And act now. This is not like a very long time before it all kicks off. By following good practices already and automations and tools that I just showed. If you are like a person who wants to listen, not to watch or read, there is also a podcast that was recorded by me and with me and Emily Fox, also from Red Hat, hosted by Mike Shema. This is Application Security Weekly. Great podcast in general. I listened it actually for quite a few years. You can listen also some of our thoughts about CRA there as well. Let's build a secure future for all and in open source way, in collaborative way. I hope that was helpful. Thank you very much.